Test.
Yeah. Which one? She's done her first year, she's coming home to next week. Yeah. So she's very pleased. Don't like it, okay? No, 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 yours is fine. I said yours on top of it. And that's for the stream, right? Cool, sounds good. No, no, this is great. You guys are stars. Fantastic. Yeah, it's, Whenever you are. Thanks. Just play Streets of London a little bit.
Have you seen the old man in the closed down market, picking up the papers and his worn out shoes? In his eyes you see no pride, hands held loosely at his side. Yesterday's paper, selling yesterday's news. How can you tell me so how can you tell me you're lonely? Say for you that the sun don't shine. Let me take you by the hand and lead.
Okay, stop. You're not singing. It's all right. Yeah. You can put your keyboard here. And Uncle Danny, just make sure the mic is pointing right at your face. There we go. Start. basically strung the timing for the first line of the song. And then what you get.
Yeah, same thing. The box.
It's a bit nervous, but it's good. He was giving it a go. Wait, but he's not bad. Not bad.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for coming. It's a privilege to be playing at this event as a tribute to such a special person. This first song is one by John Lennon, which we feel is quite fitting for the kind of life that David lived. Thank you. As soon as you're born, they make you feel small by giving you no time instead of it all, till the pain is so big you feel nothing at all. A working class hero is something to be. A working class hero is something to be. Home and they hit you at school. They hate you if you're clever and they despise a fool. Till you're so fucking crazy you can't follow their rules. A working class hero is something to be. A working class hero is something to be. That scared you for 20 odd years. Then they expect you to pick a career when you can't really function, you're so full of fear. A working class hero is something to be. A working class hero is something to be. Keep you doped with religion and sex and TV. And you think you're so clever and classless and free, but you're still fucking peasants as far as I can see. A working class hero is something to be. A working class hero is something to be. There's room at the top, they are telling you still. But first you must learn how to smile when you kill. If you want to be like the folks on the hill. A working class hero is something to be. Class hero is something to be. If you want, just follow me. To be a hero, well, just follow me. Thank you.
Corky recalls that when he visited us sometime later, he told us he was in Harare to meet up with Trish. A small world, as Corky had been a student at UCT with Trish's sister Margie. Later, Trish and Dave held their wedding reception at our house, attended by many of their South African relatives. Dave taught at the Quads, a secondary school, and energetically cycled 10 to 15 kilometers to work from their home in Belvedere. He loved cycling and enjoyed his rides throughout his life. At this time, Dave and Trish were proud parents of young Jesse, and Dave was fully involved in his care. Of course, being the committed socialist activist that he was also involved in local politics. But eventually in 1985, the Zimbabwean Central Intelligence Organization decided that he and several of his fellow activists posed a threat to the state, so they were detained in the notorious Chikurubi prison. This is obviously a terribly stressful time for all involved. But thanks to the support of friends, comrades, and the intervention of Amnesty International, after several months of incarceration, Dave was deported to the UK, escorted to his plane by the CIO. Dave and Trish's second son, Ben, was later born there. In the early 90s, after we had returned to Durban, Dave came home too, thrilled to be back on African soil. But it was also a tough time for him. Sadly, he and Trish split up, and Trish and the boys went to live in Cape Town. He was disappointed that he was unable to get a post at Natal University, but he managed to find employment at the University of Durban-Westville, where his talents were appreciated. He entertained us with stories of intrigue and politics at the institution, which seems to be a standard in most university faculties. Dave kept in contact with his boys, taking an active interest in their daily lives. He flew to Cape Town as often as possible and brought Jesse and Ben to Durban during the holidays. He loved to take them swimming, hiking, camping, and even once diving in Moses or another, being a wonderful, stable, consistent, and caring role model. His generosity is well known. He'd rush off to find a bicycle for a child if a parent didn't have the money to buy one, or organize a cake and party for a birthday, etc. We saw Dave on many occasions joyfully playing with children in a swimming pool, exhausting both spectators and kids alike. He wanted the children he came into contact with to value their education and would encourage them by showing an interest in the progress of a child was making at school. He urged them to work hard and set goals to strive for. He didn't forget these children. Even when he moved to the United States, he kept in touch. Whenever he returned, he'd visit them or organize an outing to delight them. He befriended the extended family of Nancy van Rensburg through a work colleague from HSRC. Nancy came to our home a few times to play in the pool, with Dave enthusiastically joining, of course. He also wrote me in to give matric lessons to Amber, one of the great-grandchildren. I wasn't very successful, I'm afraid. We also remember Dave organizing a lovely cake for Nancy's 90th birthday, as he felt he wanted to honor her. That was typical of Dave, being thoughtful and making a person feel valued and appreciated. When Dave and Suzanne met and started spending time together, he had to win her girls over. At first, they resisted this new adult in their mom's life. But with Dave's boundless energy, determination, and loving personality, they came not only to accept him, but to love him very much. Dave and Suzanne were married in Durban, and we were left to live in Washington. Dave obviously missed South Africa, and he kept in contact with us on WhatsApp calls. Corky and I both had long conversations with him about families, his work, and about politics. In the past 8 to 10 years, Dave regularly visited Durban, often on his way to one of the projects where he did monitoring of the impact of some of the US's water-related aid programs. He used to stay with us and was a wonderful guest, taking domestic duties very seriously, and cooked some delicious meals for us. He even received an award from Corky for cooking the best oxtail stew, a certificate proudly displayed on his and on what goes around comes around. And it's certainly true in Dave's case. He ended his life surrounded by the loving kindness he had displayed throughout his life. Hambagashe Dave, our very dear friend.
I think we're having a bit of a problem with the sound because people who are watching live streaming have complained. So hopefully this gets transmitted. So just, if you didn't hear me the first time, just to reiterate that the Hemson, and thanks you for being present this morning and paying tribute to their brother, their dad, their family member, and the rest of us as friends also appreciate you coming here as well. Just to contextualize this, and I'm sure some of the speakers will touch upon it because some of them are way back from the 60s, and I noticed Halton Cheadle there, and obviously the brothers as well. One of the most seminal unpublished theses on dock workers anywhere in the world. The Americans call them longshoremen, we call them dock workers. And David recognized in the 60s that's a critical part of the economy. In other words, they're the gatekeepers almost for what comes in and what goes out. And this country at that time being a huge exporter of raw materials and minerals, etc. Many others, they came together to make a difference. And the resurgence of unions in the early 70s, together with Harriet Bolton, who played a seminal part in all of this, was undoubtedly resulted in the formation of COSATU in 1985. And this month marks 40 years. Obviously, I think a lot of us who've been involved in the unions don't see the unions the same way we did 40 years ago as we now. And I'd welcome to argue with anyone about what's disrupted our education system and governance like anything. But I don't think the founding people in that era, and Halton Cheadle here will probably agree, that I think we lost the plot, the essence of selfless service. And that's what David epitomized. The dock workers issue, and it wasn't just dock workers, the 73 strike. And we as the 1860 Heritage Center and under Prof. Jairam Reddy as chair of the History Society, we celebrated that 2 years ago. And David was here, Crispin was here to help plan it. And it wasn't just the dock workers, it was Coronation Brick and Tile. North Coast Road was closed. The abattoir workers, the laundry workers, the garment workers, all of those came out. And the formation of what's now called SACTU, South African Clothing and Textile Workers Union, was largely a Durban-based, and David and Harriet Bolton. And Harriet was a fierce woman. I was as president, Ian Davidson was banned, so he wasn't present. But NUSAS had at that time the likes of Steve Biko and Dilly Naidu and Ruben Phillip and all of those, and then the split came in 1970 when SASO was formed post the Rhodes University debacle. But they were still close. So until David was banned in January 74, SASO and NUSAS, especially the Durban lot, and there were others who came into the picture. Rick Turner had arrived in Durban in the late 60s, I think in 69. There was a huge, this was almost a nerve center, if I may say so. Not to say the other parts of NUSAS were not strong. Remember, the NUSAS had 27,000 members claimed at the English campuses of the universities. The ASB Afrikaner student bond was probably larger and the more dominant faction. And then you had SASO, which was only at the historically black universities, with Italian University having a black section. The rest were. So I just want to contextualize that because I think a lot of us, one thing David stressed throughout his life was, let's look at things in context. Why did Smuts lose the election in 47? 1 year getting its independence was no coincidence with Smuts losing here, et cetera, and the end of World War II. But I think a lot of it was grounded on solid issues, and David was a prolific writer. I mean, his articles have been published all over. It's a pity that he didn't convert that into a book, that thesis, okay? But Crispin, it's not too late for somebody to take up the cudgel. And I think, that comes. Our next speaker is Peter John Huttig.
I had the immense privilege of managing David's care over the final period of his life. As we know, David was quite a character, and we learned so much from him. We really enjoyed many of the same things, David and I, and both had naturally inquiring minds. So we like to indulge in podcasts and documentaries and long discussions on history and politics, the environment, and so much more. These are memories that I will carry with me throughout my life. I will also always remember David's inner strength and resolve over the past year. Despite having some serious health complications and having to go through very difficult periods as a result of his poor health, David remained strong and resolute throughout. He never lost his sense of humor or his compassion and kindness and sense of self. No matter how hard it became, David stayed strong. So I've chosen to read a poem today called Invictus by William Henley, which I'm sure many of you know. It's short, punchy, and sometimes a little dark, but I feel it represents David's resilience and inner strength, even in the face of adversity. Invictus. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole of my soul. Thank you.
So the song we chosen is Teach Your Children, another popular song in David's.
You are on the road, must have a code that you can live by, and so become yourself. It's just a goodbye. Teach your children well, their father's help did slowly go by, and feed them on your dreams, the one they fix, the one you know by. Don't you ever ask them why, if they told you you would cry, so just look at them and sigh, and know they love you. Of tender years, can't know the fear that your elders grew by, so please help them with your youth. They seek the truth before they can die. Teach your parents well, and know they love you.
For those who don't know me, and I think there are not many, I am Crispin Hemson, and I was struggling a bit to know what to say because it has been a very complex life history that David's had, and a remarkable one. So I just wanted to give a little bit of sense of, how come the Hemson family came to be in Durban. And of course, it all goes to the docks, all right? So we come, I think English people in this part of the world like pointing to the lengthy line of nobility from which we came. Our nobility was agricultural laborers, security guards, very small farmers, a railway worker, fishing people, and that illustrious background. My mother's family were Welsh and fishing people mainly, and my father's family were from a very rural background. But in the generation before our parents, my grandfather moved from being a domestic worker who married another domestic worker. He moved from that to becoming a pastor and got respectability. And my mother's father moved from being in the fishing family to going into the Navy and did quite well as a naval officer. So we were respectable completely. What happened was that my mother grew up in Plymouth because it was a naval base. And my father went to work there, and that's where they met, in a church. Just about everything that happened in the family seemed to happen in a church. And then came the Second World War, in which my parents' new home, and grandparents' home was bombed. One big bomb in the same area flattened both houses. My mother was very traumatized by this, and I think growing up we didn't understand quite the impact these events had had on her, and why she was often so sort of anxious and angry about things. I think from my mother, David inherited a kind of Welsh fire, brimstone and fire and determination. And from my father, being meticulous and at times absurdly generous, a failing that the brothers all share, I'm afraid. But as a result of the war, my father was sent to work on naval installations in Simonstown and then in Durban, actually the first radar facilities. And my mother and my sister Jill came about 18 months later on a ship with thousands of Italian prisoners of war and arrived in Durban. And my father's career flourished as a quantity surveyor. We lived in Kloof the earlier part of our lives. My mother tells the story of going into the domestic quarters for the domestic workers and finding David at the age of 4 or 5 sharing a suite with the child of one of the domestic workers. One would suck and then hand over to the other, and then suck and then hand back again. So my mother ascribed the sense of egalitarianism to that event, but that was David for you. He was always, I remember him as being outgoing, popular, very much in contrast to the two twins. And he went to Kearsney College. His academic career at Kearsney was not particularly great. His best friend, Humphrey Tedder, however, they managed to get into trouble, I think throwing rocks onto the railway line below our house at Bertha's Hill, which should have been a warning to everyone about what was going to happen. Humphrey actually was the grandson of none other than J.S. Marwick, inventor of the Durban system. Somebody like a very problematic character in the life of this province, in fact. But we didn't realize until later that how close we were to the people who'd actually created the apartheid state. David from Kersley went to, as an American Field Service scholar, to rural Minnesota, that center of revolutionary ferment. And came back a convinced Marxist. I remember him telling the family in the car, I think we'd all gone to Johannesburg to collect him or something, about the sins of Anglo-American, which is not really what we'd been hearing much of until then. And for a time he went to the army, which actually simply intensified his sense of what was wrong, fundamentally wrong, the militarism, the racism, and his anger at that. We ended up together in first-year university, the three of us. David was on the SRC very soon after that. He became then the editor of the student newspaper, Dome. And we all got into trouble with the then Vice-Chancellor, Professor Owen Horwood, who at one point threw out four people, two of whom were myself and David, for undermining the authority of the Vice-Chancellor. We accused him of lying. Unfortunately for us, we were correct. Yeah, so we had a very tumultuous time, and there'd be student protests. And Houghton's going to pick up from there in terms of the really significant work that then unfolded. At that time, we had this strange situation of being a white university with a black section that was there as the medical school, as well as a few students, including Rogers Ragavan, from the city campus of Howard College here in the marketplace, a building that's now completely derelict. But there was this ferment of intellectual activity that developed in these contacts, the collision of people from very different backgrounds, and then trying to understand each other, trying to find best ways of understanding the society and addressing it. At this point, David became very close to the Bolton family, and Houghton, I'm sure, will be talking about that, and the role of Harriet Bolton in supporting the work of David. And David stayed with the Bolton family when he was placed under house arrest in January 1974, and under these restrictions. Eventually, he moved, during the house arrest, he moved to my parents' home in Buzzards Hill, and eventually left a note, which I found the other day, to him. He went off in the night, got driven to near the Swazi border, like the MK operatives, crossed over, and what happened after that. I think Rob has spoken about the time in Zimbabwe, and David, for once in his life, getting into trouble, and being deported. So I don't know, Jesse, if you've ever put on your CV that you were deported from Zimbabwe because of your socialist activities. But the irony, of course, was that he was taken, the decision to deport him came from Robert Mugabe. David was taken to an old civil servant who said, "Well, this is my last day on the job here. I've got to deport you. I've got to put you on a plane to London. Do you want to go first class?" So the whole family went out first class on the flight. I think the time when David came back from exile, I think it was very difficult for his family. And it was Rob referred to the fact of the kind of Stalinist attitude that only the people who conformed to whatever the line was should be supported in the new South Africa. And that arrogance of power was something David fought against his whole life. I mean, you might not agree with him about his politics always, but you could agree with his criticisms of people who try to straitjacket everything into their sense of how things should be, and we must just accept it. Of course, I'll come back to the time in the 1970 strike conference commemoration in 2023. While he was in Durban, though, he became involved with interesting work. Trying to find ways in which people in a very, very remote area with terrible roads could actually get water. It was an interesting experience. I think that after the wedding to Suzanne and his time in Manor Gardens, he was still with the HSRC then, they then made that again, rather for David, a difficult move to the United States, where he developed some interesting skills in evaluating major projects for groups like USAID and so on. Around that time, I think he also regained his stronger ties to his extended family around the world. A couple of years ago, of course, he came back, close to 3 years ago, for the commemoration of the 1973 strikes. They made the mistake of putting him as the first speaker on the first panel, which gave him the right to denounce the ANC, in the presence of past and present cabinet ministers, and he made the most of that. He got up at a point, he said, the ANC would say to us, wait until we've got power. Wait until we've got power. And his final comment was, and what did we get in the end? No power. He was talking about the load shedding, of course. All right, so Jonathan and I would, at that time, he was staying with us. Jonathan and I would have coffee at 6 o'clock every morning on the patio. And we'd always be waiting anxiously for the moment when David would slam down the coffee cup on the patio in his very quiet way. And we would jump a bit like this. And he'd lecture us about the sins of various people in the world, Putin, the ANC, whoever it was who was taking his ire at that time. But through all of this, I mean, there was a sense of like actual kindness, generosity, ability to feel warmly for so many people. I mean, just somebody sent me something, I am in Namibia. David paid for me, paid for the materials for me to build a new shack. I mean, I don't know how many stories there are like that, that David was doing things for people all over the place. And yeah, the time he came to Durban was very sad. I mean, I picked up in about May last year that he was not handling things well. And then I'd phoned him in July, not long after his birthday, to find out that he had been admitted into a horrible American hospital, into a psychiatric ward, and he told me, I'm afraid the family name has been, done terrible things to the family name, and it took me a long time to work out what it was. It was actually nothing at all. But it was as if everything had gone wrong simultaneously. His thinking about life and about himself, as well as his physical state, had suddenly deteriorated. So in the end, the decision was made that he come and live with us here. And I'd had experience of looking after our mother and our Aunt Betty, and that was placid in comparison to looking after David. There were problems, there were going to be problems, but there was a major health crisis that we had to keep sending him off to Entabeni Hospital. But strangely enough, in that period, he'd have sudden moments of lucidity, and you could talk to him. I mean, remember the one time I suddenly got him immediately on the line to Ben and Jesse to speak to them about, and he was communicating really effectively. Even about 2 months ago, there was one day he complained to us. He said, "Look at this! Look at my legs." He said, "It looks like I've been in Auschwitz." He said, and then I'm tired of being in bed here the whole time. Can't you do something better? So we had to deal with this sense of, I'm still here, I'm still thinking. Of course, the carers had a tough time. Ulutando, Devon, Elaine, and under the management of Peter, I mean, they did spectacular work and were warm and supportive to David, however complicated and difficult it might be at times. And David would cry out. I mean, I'd wake in the night and I'd hear him crying out at night, and it was very distressing. So in the end, though, the last few days were peaceful, and the way in which he finally passed away was as it should have been, with Suzanne and Soraya there, and Jonathan and me. And we were able to speak to him, and I was holding his hand until his pulse finally ended. So, and things happened in a way that it was as if he knew that was the right moment to go. Just worked like that. So, it's, I'd always hoped that he would still be working on he had 2 book projects that I was hoping he was still going to be working on. I have a message from our Aunt Suzanne, who's the one member of the family who stayed in Plymouth, became president of the Chamber of Commerce in Plymouth when she started a business at the age of 50. She's now 101, and we had a discussion with her this week and her children. Message from Suzanne is, David was my godson. His parents, Joan and Rex Hemson, were both British. In World War II, David's father Rex was sent to work on Simonstown and then Durban Harbour. His mother, Joan, and sister Gillian were left in England, and in 1942, they went to South Africa by ship, where David was born in Durban. His godfather was a naval captain, Peter Melly, who was on a naval ship in Durban at that time. David came to visit us at Newton Ferries near Plymouth a few years ago. It was with great sadness that we heard he had a severe and terminal illness, and we thank Crispin, Jonathan, his wife, and his sons for looking after him during this time. We also feel for Jill at this time as well. So, a couple of weeks ago, we had a ceremony where we scattered David's ashes at the entrance to Durban Harbour, which is a fitting place when you look at the history that he'd been through. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Crispin. For those of you who don't know, Crispin's younger is one of the twins, Jonathan sitting next to him. And these were three formidable brothers. Crispin's got a history of himself. I mean, a history in terms of education and latterly heading the International Center for Nonviolence at DUT. I just want to touch on a couple of things before Halton Cheadle comes up. Halton's one of the few remaining guys from that 60s, early 70s mafia, if I may use the term, that actually kept the flame alive of resistance to apartheid, the so-called silent decade. And let's make no mistake, we don't applaud them, we don't recognize them. I don't think we do enough to remember the people who kept that alive. It's very popular for people to claim that they were in a struggle, etc., but these were the guys at the coalface, whether it's New Sasso or other formations, and they were mainly non-European unity movement, NUAM in the Western Cape, and in KZN it was the New Sasso boys and girls. And I think when you look at the issues that have come through after that, in fact, I dare say, and I'll leave Halton to respond to this, the Vian Commission, from my readings, was a direct response to these youngsters getting the trade unions back on track. Because in the 30s and 40s and 50s, when you had Pungula Zulu and the others running the unions, then you had sweetheart unions through the late 50s, early parts of the 60s, and then you got the shake-up of and partly, and David, Crispin, I was looking at the contextualizing this because David, after he finished school, went to the army for 18 months or so, 63, 64. And then it just happened at the right time. He went on as a Macon Field Scholar to Minnesota. I can't remember the name of the town. And he came back totally flipped in a nice way. He saw the injustices. And these young guys at Intel were fighting a cause for the poorest of the poor. In other words, the Wages Commission came out of this. The issue of fundamental justice. Right? It was something that resonated with a lot of people, but a lot of people just didn't have the ability to translate that into another level. Before I call Halton up, just one other coincidence is Mr. Hemson Sr. coming to Salisbury Island as an engineer, quantity surveyor. It's not lost upon those of us, and I wasn't young enough then, to start or be a student at University College for Indians on the island. And that's happened to a number of those families who came from Plymouth and Portsmouth. Philip Dexter is another one of them. His father came out here as a marine engineer to Simonstown and married a local person, and they stayed on. So I dare say these islands had something to do with the revolution as well, in a quiet way. I hope that could be captured in some way or the other. The other is when, and we made this point a number of times, I was a technical Intel in the 90s, and Ben Kwape invited David, and we had, at one session, we had Dennis Brutus as visiting professor or lecturer. We had Rogers Raghavan. We had David, who was a visitor. And we had Kader Asmal come in to grace one of our graduations. And if you know Kader Asmal and his abrasiveness, but David took him on over the water delivery. Because Kader was saying one man, one tap. And David said, what about sustainability? And of course, Kader went on to a tiz. Not even an extra scotch could calm him down, kind of stuff, right? In a brown glass, of course, right? And then when Madiba came onto campus, Madiba had never met David before, to my knowledge, but he remembered, one, they shared a birthday, and secondly, he could speak about his time in Chikurubi and Tanzania when David, Paula Enso, Robin Peterson, and Martin Legasik were expelled from the ANC for guess what? For being too left-wing, for saying that we should be looking at class and not race. Okay? And it comes back a full circle. So there was an acknowledgement. David was certainly known in the circles. Nobody denied his presence. They, as Crispin said, might not have agreed with him, but he could raise his voice in a not necessarily a loud way, but certainly needle them, but in a way that the debate was stirred. I remember him and having him and Dennis Brutus and Rogers and Ben Kwapa and Sat Scoop and a few others around the table one day, and Srini Mudli. And of course, that was quite fiery at the end. Halton, stage is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I want to celebrate my lifelong friendship with David, but focus today on our collaboration over 5 years together at the university and organizing trade unions. But before I turn to that involvement, I think our friendship was founded on a love of swimming, a love of walking and hiking, and a love of cooking. Somehow or another, all three merged. But I want to start, as I say, a few anecdotes from student life. David was a news editor of Dome, and he had wrote me in to work on the newspaper. He discovered that OPF Howard, the vice-chancellor, had secretly joined the National Party and failed to attend a graduation ceremony because he was speaking at an NP gathering in Bloemfontein. When asked to explain his absence, he said that he was ill at the time. David published the expose in Dome and was then subject to a disciplinary inquiry, if I remember correctly. And his defense there, certainly this is how he reported it, that he believed Howard, that he indeed was ill, because only a sick person would attend a gathering in Bloemfontein for the National Party. Many of you might not know, the South Africans certainly will know, that the only English-speaking member of the Nationalist cabinet prior to Howard was named Trollope. And when Howard was appointed Minister of Finance, my memory is that it was reported in Dome that who would follow a Trollope into the cabinet? Only a Howard. I also remember in Dome that Franco Frescura, a cartoonist at the Wits newspaper, had published a baby in nappies looking into the toilet and said, with a blurb saying, "Are you the Prime Minister?" And the Wits student rag was immediately banned. Frescura, they tried to expel Frescura from the country, but the Italians wouldn't accept him. But our response in Dome was a student in an academic gown looking into the toilet and saying, "We apologize, sir." And so Dome got banned. I think what's important to recognize is that our radicalization, that's my radicalization, he was several years older than me, was really a product of time and place. The time was 1968 through to 1974, when both of us were banned and house arrested. And the place was the University of Natal and Durban, what Tony Morfitt called the Durban moment. So what is the time? Well, Steve Biko was at the medical school and had sparked the breakaway of black students from the National Union of South African Students to form SASO, the South African Student Organization, largely because of the insipid liberalism of NUSAS and the dominance of white leadership. There were lecturers that taught Marxism, Michael Newpin, Rick Turner, who was subsequently assassinated, and Eddie Webster, all of which was decidedly anti-Stalinist in approach. We devoured New Left literature in the 1960s and early 70s and followed the student worker protests in France and anti-war protests in the United States. And I think, so at the time, we were affected by by all of these events and what was taking place. But I think very important were the absences. And they're really important. Neither the ANC nor the South African Communist Party had any presence, intellectual or activist presence, on the campus at the time. And I think that's really quite important, because there was no ideological straitjacket to constrain Steve Biko in developing black consciousness, which they regarded in exile as with suspicion. And for left-wing students, led by David and Rick Turner at the time, to develop their own praxis, a practice of organizing the black working class into trade unions. We engaged with Steve Biko and accepted the standpoint that it was for blacks to lead the struggle against apartheid, and the role of white students was to support that leadership. But we differed on the issue of class. We took the standpoint, which did take years to evolve, that the most important organizational project was to organize the working class, which by the end of the 1960s was overwhelmingly black. It started with the formulation of a proposal to set up the Wages Commission, which David put together, to look into the wages and working conditions of campus workers. I remember David adding a last-minute peroration after the words campus workers. Before submitting the proposal to a student meeting, he added the words, and workers in the municipality. Charles Newpern chaired the commission and took responsibility for campus workers, and David and others had much more ambitious pretensions. We, and that included Carl Tipp and Jerry Maria and David Davis, considered campus too narrow a focus and instead aimed to organize the working class as a whole. We hijacked a printing press that the engineering students had put together and published a rudimentary newspaper called Isisebenzi, not a particularly good translation of the workers, and to demonstrate how little we knew, we were oblivious to the fact that the Communist Party, South African Communist Party, had a newspaper called Umsebenzi. You can imagine what the security police thought at the time. But we engaged with progressive trade unions, and Harriet Bolton in particular, that had organized Indian and colored workers at the time in the textile and clothing industries. And to kickstart the organization of African workers into unions, we established the General Workers' Benefit Fund, offering funeral benefits, something that was desperately needed, employers did not provide, and was too expensive and too exploitative offered by insurance companies. The fund provided the opportunity to prepare workers to run their own organizations, and although open to all workers, the organizational focus was in the docks, the textile and engineering industries, with a view to establishing unions once there was a critical mass of members. And that did come to pass, with the first three unions being the Metal and Allied Workers Union, the National Union of Textile Workers, and the Transport and General Workers Union, which was based in the docks. All had black executive committees. Although David and I originally took up positions and as organizers and acting general secretaries in these unions, our object was to build capacity for black workers to run the unions themselves, and we considered ourselves as scaffolding, which would fall away. Not that we expected banning to achieve that purpose, but for us to take supportive roles in due course. David and I, Johnny Copeland and Chris Albertine, Wit students that came down and continued the work after our banning, and all of us took on supportive roles thereafter. I, Johnny Copeland, Chris Albertine became labor lawyers. Alec Irwin left the leadership role in FASATU to perform an occupational role. So despite 2 rounds of bannings of white students, the union survived, and I want to take credit for recruiting an extraordinary worker leader, June Rose Nala, who started as a shop steward in a frame textile factory called Afritex, and then to become the first general secretary of Metal and Allied Workers Union. The union survived the bannings, and became national unions that were later to form the core unions that were to make up COSATU. NUMSA, the largest union in South Africa, started life as the Metal and Allied Workers Union in Durban. But throughout the 1970s and 1980s, the ANC, the SACP, and SACTU were hostile to these unions, referring to them as yellow unions, and pressurized UK trade unions not to have links with us in a campaign they called Direct Links Stinks. It is because of this mischaracterization of the nature of the apartheid state that they called fascist. Although there are many similarities between a fascist and an apartheid state, both brutally authoritarian and oppressive and racist to the core, but not fascist, because the vast majority of the South African population could not be incorporated into a fascist project, such as took place in Italy, Spain, and Nazi Germany. It was a brutally authoritarian, colonial, racist state pretending to be a white democracy, which generated contradictions that could be taken advantage of, allowing space for an open opposition, all of which the unions and the mass democratic movement in the 1980s demonstrated. And this concept of space was central to Rick Turner and David's vision of what could be done openly as an open part of the struggle. He was then went into exile together with Paula Ensor and Rob Peterson, and they were involved and went into exile, and from there tried to push support for the internal unions based on their experience here, which, as we know, led to their expulsion from the ANC and the South African Congress of Trade Unions. Alec Owen sent a message, and Alec he says, "I regret that I'm unable to be present at the memorial for David. May I use this message to express my deepest condolences to his nearest and dearest and all his close comrades. We have lost a stalwart of the struggle and of the labor movement in particular. David was a part of a group of activists who believed that we change the world through praxis, analysis, and informed strategic action. Fortunately, Helton is with you, and he can speak of these times and the role that David played. I wish to express my deepest respects for the life that David lived and what he initiated in those early years in the 1970s. Sadly, he had to live many years abroad, but never left the struggle and always kept the labor movement in his heart, analysis and actions. He did not fear challenging times, but chose to work to address those challenges and to make the world a better place for his fellow citizens. We can learn from David even in these times. Hamba kahle, comrade, we salute you."
Thank you, Helton. Our next speaker is the eldest son of David. That's Jesse Hemson Stutters. And then we'll have a music interlude. And then the youngest son will speak. That's Ben. Just at this point, there was two other messages. One was from, I'm sure there's other messages as well, but one from Paul Pretorius, who most of you will know from the Zondo Commission as evidence leader. He was a contemporary of the Durban Mafia. He writes, "A stalwart from Durban way back, such a gentle soul with a fierce commitment to justice and the value of life and a great sense of humor to top it all, Paul." And then from Laurel Baldwin Raghavan, the partner of Prof. Rogers Raghavan, and they spent Christmas 2022 together when David had come down for the Durban the 73 moment strike. He had an exhibition that went Durban, Cape Town, Johannesburg, and he worked with Omar Bacha on that. And it was in Durban, it was hosted at the Bat Center. And while he was in Johannesburg, Patrick Bond and him worked together on a few things as well. Laura writes, David and Rogers were kindred spirits who aspired to improve the lives of ordinary people. People who would be able to send their children to school, not with bare feet, but with shoes that fit properly, and intact soles so that no water leaked through. People who would earn a living wage doing something that reinforced the inherent human dignity. People who could consume food that was both abundant and nutritious. They hailed from a generation of activists that did not seek personal accolades but did things selflessly, demanding equity and fairness. Sharing Christmas lunch around our table in Johannesburg in 2022 was a cheerful and long overdue reunion for both David and Rogers. Now that they're together raising hell for the greater good, deepest condolences to David's children, his family and siblings, with love from the Baldwin Raghavans. Jesse?
I just wanted to welcome and thank everyone here today and everyone attending through live streaming. Maybe just firstly, I just wanted to say a really special thank you to Chris and John and Peter and all the helpers. I think you guys gave Dave so much dignity and care and love in these final days. And in many cases, people would be in a kind of care home or some kind of facility. And I think all those kind of decisions that kept coming up over this last year. And Chris, you always kind of put your kind of yourself forward and said, like, look, this is the right thing for Dave. And I know that wasn't easy on any of you. So, being like far abroad, living, overseas, I think just like I felt like he was in such good care and in good hands. So that meant a lot to me. And to, especially to Stu and Soroya, I think, being by his side this, in every way, and especially in his final moments together with Chris, John and Peter, I think knowing that he was surrounded by all of you in the final days gave, I think all of us great comfort. So, Dave was a man with a dreamer's heart, bold, fearless, and full of possibility. Whether it was the way he spoke or laughed, you always knew who was in the room, and not just because he was loud, but I think because he was so full of life. One of my favorite moments was him wearing a shirt that made him look like he had a tattooed armed sleeves, walking proudly down the Cape Town promenade. He was fully entertained by the reactions and completely himself. And I'm not sure if myself or Sue shared his dress sense, but I think we all enjoyed some of the colorful outfits. Dave loved Durban more than anywhere. I have so many childhood memories visiting him here over the school holidays, hiking in the valleys below both this hill, including the time I got tick bite fever. And of course, our family tradition of curry the moment I arrived with my brother Ben. In his wedding speech to me, just over 2 years back now, he spoke about being bold. And being bold can definitely lead to some challenges, and Dave certainly had his fair share. I think it's also, though, given me the courage to take on things that I would have otherwise avoided, and for that I really thank him. Dave always believed that anything was possible. I've even heard rumors, I think Chris, more recently, that even in his last years, he was still remotely organizing anti-establishment strikes in far-flung places, and I think in Asia more recently. Dave was always trying to change the world in his own way. I've heard many people today talking of Dave's strength, and I can say that he definitely really fought till the end. I think pushing for his 80th birthday in July, and then up until recently, his grandson, who was born 5 weeks ago today, and my son Jack. I think I can say I'm really proud to call him my father. Dave was one of the most joyful people you could meet, with a deep empathy for anyone in need. May his memory stay with us as a reminder of what's possible if you can dream. Dave, Amantla, and Hamba Gashle.
your flag on march, and love is not a victory march. It's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.
Thank you.
Of my dad, David Hemson. Okay, let's just go for it. So actually, yeah, it's interesting. I always called David David. I never called David Dad. And yeah, I can lean right in. I actually have quite a soft voice, so I have to really get into the close to the mic. Thank you so much. I always wondered why, because there was a bit of distance there between us. But I always loved David tremendously. And he would call... Jess and me brothers. So in a way, we're all equal. We're all brothers. Listening to everyone share about his politics and his beliefs and his values. I guess it just reminds me of how he wanted to live his life. And, you know, a lot of things David did could be a little bit, in a way, contradictory or challenging. David had, in many ways, many families. And the workers are a new family that I'm kind of discovering a little bit today through the sharing. And then it was me and my brother, and then there's other members from his second wife's kids here too, which are part of his family. And here in Durban, he had so many young ones, kids that he loved and he was involved with. I have a very close friend, Yasha, who I wish was here today. Maybe he's online in spirit. He's someone that I met through this network of David's. I never got jealous. You know, I never really felt like I was missing out. And I guess the same goes for Dave's politics. It took up so much of his life. He was so involved in it. And maybe you think there's a price to pay for investing in these things. Someone told me he was someone who would sleep with a pillow, with a gun under your pillow. So I'm sure when David was very active in his politics, there would have been some very serious prices. But yeah, I don't, it's funny because David lived in Durban. I lived in Cape Town with Patricia and with my brother Jesse. So We would visit him a couple times a year, sometimes more, sometimes less. And yeah, it was always good times. So yeah, I think overall, maybe I'm blessed not to have lived with David. We're going to get some first-hand accounts of that too. But yeah, very positive childhood memories. Yeah, let's see if we can rustle up a story from the archives. So David once took me and Jesse on a family holiday. And I can remember on the way to, where we were leaving from Durban, and we were going to, so it would be one of these like wildlife nature areas. I can't remember the name. And he would stop on the side of the road, and he would ask people for directions, and he'd be constantly engaging with people around him in the space. And then we arrived in these kind of huts, Rondavel-style huts. It's quite basic where we are, which is nice, and we're kind of camping, but it's raining and it's a bit miserable. And David's trying to get me and Jess to leave the place, leave this Rondavel and go to the beach, even though it is raining and whatnot. And he really tried to convince us, and we didn't end up joining him. But he came back later saying that he had actually not just been to the beach, but he'd been to a kind of local tribal ceremony. It was the goat slaughtered, and other local cultural customs. And so we're just like, okay, well, I'm glad we didn't have to deal with that. And the next day, we woke up, there was like almost this kind of outside gazebo, white structure in the center of the complex, and we go up and looking around, and inside there's a group of kind of dressed up medical people. And so we ask them about them, and they turn out they're Irish medical interns doing a kind of a missionary work medically for the community. And so in this holiday space, there was also a kind of like a medical intervention that came in. And it's funny because these are the kind of things that would happen with David if you go on holiday with him, is there would be all sorts of political involvement that would sneak into the experiences. And I'm glad we can laugh about it now, so that's also nice. Okay. Yeah, I think the main thing I want to share is that David is an amazing storyteller, and I think that's something that I also really have learned to appreciate. David's brothers too, you can hear, have that quality of being able to share very easily from the heart. And yeah, I think it's often can be annoying when you have a father who would have his stories that he's sharing constantly. But I realized that, the things that I will take away from David's life that I will have with me would be my red beard, which is, maybe you can see it a little bit. My brother has more ginger hair, and it'll be very interesting seeing how his son Jack, what color hair that has. And definitely in my body, I can feel my dad David in my heart. Yeah. And also in the way in which I tell his story. So it's something that I really aspire to do, is to share about his life. If I have kids one day, also to share with them. And so I'm grateful for that opportunity now to talk about David, also to cry a little bit and get some of these feelings out, to be heard and seen in this community, and to see others. So I feel like it's very healing, and so I really want to celebrate that and David's life too. Thank you.
Okay, that's better. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I am Darianne Mazala. I am one of Suzanne Leclerc Mazala's daughters. There's 4 of us, Nina, Raquel, and then Soroya, who's here as well with me. I just wanted to share some brief thoughts about David Hemson. He would be so happy to see everyone here gathered for him. He is a person who spent most of his life, obviously even after apartheid, fighting for the poor. Even up until last year, like Jesse mentioned, he was organizing lots of different things online at all times. David was always organizing and writing something. It was truly his life's mission to elevate laborers and workers, helping them organize and strategize to make their work and their government work better for them. People may not have always agreed with the ways in which he attempted to reach that goal, but we can't deny that he had an admirable goal. He had a vision that South Africa, and specifically Durban, could and should be better for its working people. In addition to all the things that has been written about David here in the program, and also that was mentioned in the tribute by Rob and Crispin, I also will remember David as someone who loved the ocean, swimming in North Beach, his photography, which he was very proud of. He has so many rolls of film that could be digitized into who knows what, but he has rolls and rolls of them. He's always taking photos. His sense of humor, his sense of style, because David had crazy t-shirts that everybody knows about, and then also his ability to talk to literally anyone, his love of history, as well specifically his love of Durban's history. David was a natural storyteller, and I remember once asking him, like we were driving past the UKZN Res, and he went to, when it was University of Natal, he stayed around there, and I was like, David, did the Res look like this when you lived there? How was it when you were there? And then next thing, David's telling me about the history of Botha's Hill. I'm hearing about dock workers. I'm hearing about his time in the army. But I was like, what does this have to do with UKZN? But he just had stories that he could tell you for days. He was also so generous, which has already been highlighted, I think. He was so giving of himself, and also he did give everyone the benefit of the doubt, sometimes in ways that made him appear a little naive, but also was a true reminder of humanity. In today's age, I think it's easy for people, it's easier to really kind of go with the flow. It's easier to be part of a herd and not to stand out and be part of the status quo. But that was totally not David. David was a free thinker. He was very independent. He was very comfortable being the black sheep and standing alone if that was something that he believed in. He had no problem standing out, which I also think is a lesson that I will be taking away from David as well. Now, I just want to end on something a little more superficial, but David would want me to mention this. He was so physically fit for his age, okay? He will tell you that he was like, I'm the fittest person in this age group. I can do this, and he would always challenge you to laps, to swim. He was such a strong swimmer. Up until very recently, I think he could still outswim me and outrun me. But he really took pride in also his physical health as well. Yeah, that's where I'm going to end. I'll say that, we obviously love David Shame. And his memory is always going to live on here in Durban, in the fruits of his labor. Thank you all for coming.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Eric Nkosi. I used to be a dog worker in Durban with Dr. David Hemson. But before I give my speech, David was my friend. But I want to declare this. I am a Christian. I am a born again. I am now a child of God. My church is in Geneva, Bambai, opposite Phoenix. It is a shack. My church is a shack, but inside there is God. And before I give my speech, I want to quote from the Holy Bible. Genesis 8, verse 1. And God remembered Noah. We all know Noah after the floods. He remembered Noah and all the wild animals and all the livestock. God sent wind and the waters receded. In that manner, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say to the Hemson family, may God remember you in these trying times. I've lost a brother. You've lost a family member. David was my brother. Ladies and gentlemen, let me give you a brief history about me and David. I didn't know David. He didn't know me. We first met David in the harbor. It was a mass meeting of all casual workers. We were all black people, all. Uneducated, very dirty. But David, I didn't know him. He just came and sat at the back. Maybe most of you know Albert Park, just a park, but with some pavilion. He just sat there, and we wondered, who's this white man? Maybe the new boss? Because we're fighting labor brokers. We wanted to end all labor brokers. Willie Sira was our leader. He was addressing us. And he said, guys, you see that white man sitting there? Oh, look. Oh, okay, there's a white man, okay. That white man, we are here today because of him. He was fighting with us, although he was never present. He trained me. That is why today we have achieved what we have achieved. In fact, we kicked out labor brokers, and a new scheme was to be introduced whereby workers are going to run or control themselves in the harbor. If Transnet wanted to hire a labor, he will come to us, not through a labor broker. And Willie Sira taught us. This is the man who taught me about the dogs. This is the man who have studied this thing in Liverpool. And he wants to introduce this thing called the National Dog Labor Scheme, whereby the workers must run themselves, which means there mustn't be a labor broker in between. And we all stood up and gave David Hemson a standing ovation. Little did we know that this Willie Sira was corrupt. Ladies and gentlemen, it was in February, if I'm not mistaken. And me and Dave, we never met. Maybe after 4 months, David came to our center where all workers were stationed, if I can put it that way. He called another person called Ben. He said, Ben, can I talk to you? Then he spoke to Ben. Then he said, call Eric. I don't know how he knew my name. And then he said, Eric, let us talk. The scheme was functioning. Everything was well. He said, let us talk. I said, you want to talk with me? But this man, I don't know him. He said, let us talk. Okay, I said, okay. We went and talked. And he said, you see, this scheme that we have started is going to close. The employers want to close it down. I said, how come, Dave? He told me that your leader, Willie Sira, has sold you out. Willie Sira is black. Ladies and gentlemen, I've learned that David was white outside, but inside was black. Willie Sira was black outside, but inside was white. He sold us out, that Willie Sira. He said, Eric, there are 2 ways. We have to stop this. I didn't know Dave, but we have to be brave. But it's up to you. And I was thinking, why? Because we had thousands. Why Dave chose me? I said, Dave, what you must do? He said, this man, he has made a meeting with the employers. You are pay as you earn, what, tax? You are not supposed to pay tax. You are earning legally. And that tax does not go to SARS. Willie and his guys, his group of white people, are eating your money. I said, Dave, are you sure? He said, I'm sure. Believe it or not. And this man is not registered because we are under a union. He's not registered. He's a fraudster. But now in my mind, Dave and Willie Sira were together. Why now Dave is talking like that? Then I called upon one of my fellow comrades. I said, comrades, there's a problem. This white man is saying this and this. Just like that, ladies and gentlemen. He's saying this and this. And then the guys, to my surprise, they say, this white man is right. We must stop Willie Sira. We stopped him. I want to cut matters short. Dave became the president of the union in the docks, the only white man. I became the vice president. Everything went well. I remember we went to organize in Richards Bay. We have done something that no other union has done. We organized all the casual workers, all. They've joined our union. I think because they saw this white man, that's why maybe black people, I don't know. That's why all of them, because they were in union there, Satao. But people said no. There are other big unions, they said no. But we were from nowhere, even our union is not known even today. I don't know, maybe I've even forgot the name of the union. But people, the casual workers in Richards Bay, all around the harbor, they've joined us. Everything was well. But to the employers, it was not good. I remember after everybody signed on, one of the employers, before we leave, or because we were supposed to sleep, over there, he said, guys, don't sleep. That's why I'm a man of God today. One employer, he said, guys, at 2 a.m. you must leave because you are going to be ambushed. One employer was sent by God. He saved our life. He's white. He said, guys, don't sleep. 2 a.m., leave Richards Bay. At 2 a.m., we left Richards Bay. Another highlight with David. David was a very brave person. We have lost a comrade, and he was to be buried in Ndwedwe. David Hemson was there. I remember we lost another comrade. He was supposed to be buried in Mangos, near the border of Mozambique. David borrowed us his car. He gave us the money. He said, go there. Then we said, Dave, we cannot drive. Who's going to drive? There was only one guy who could drive. And the rest of us don't have license. But there's one guy who can drive, but he doesn't have a license. David said, okay, guys, I can give you my car. But this person with the license, he mustn't drive. I said, Dave, I know you are a straight guy. Who must drive? Because all of us who don't have a license. I said, this one must drive. He pointed to another guy. We went there. We buried our comrade. We came back. The struggle continues. When we came back, a phone rang while I was in the office. I used to be in the office, guys. Because of the struggle, I used to be there. I used to meet with the likes of Malcolm Stahl, those who were in charge of the port. It was us, Dave, and other guys. A phone rang. A person who murdered or assassinated one of our comrades, a hitman in fact, Crispin, phoned me. He said, I want to meet you. I'm not going to end my story. I want to meet you and David Hemson. David was working there in HRC, something in KZN. He's a hitman. But he didn't tell us that he's a hitman. He said, I want to meet you and David. That is a story that I will never forget, ladies and gentlemen. I said, okay, who are you? He said, I was a driver of Willie Sierra. Okay, you are the driver of Willie Sierra, okay. You want to meet me and Dave, okay. Then I phoned Dave. Dave, there's a guy, he was a driver of Willie Sierra. He wants to meet us. Remember, Willie Sierra, because we chased him away, we stopped the money, he ran away. We don't know where he went to. Maybe he went overseas or maybe he went somewhere else, I don't know. Then this hitman said, he wants to meet me and Dave. Only me and Dave. Then I phoned Dave. There's this guy who wants to meet us. But I suspect this guy is a hitman. He's the one who killed Vusi. Are you willing to meet this guy? Dave says, yes. Then this guy phoned again. Are we meeting? Then I said, yes. He said, make sure we meet at 2:30 near King Edward Hospital Butchery. Okay. At 2:30, David Hemson was there. Eric Nkos, which is me, we were there in the butchery. Sit down there. Maybe we bought some coke. We sat down there. We waited for this man. And this young man came. But before he came, I asked Dave, what do you have? Maybe a gun? Because me, I've got guys I've deployed with guns, Dave. I've got guns. Because we were running the harbor. Me, guy, I've got, what about you? Then Dave, he produced a pen and a notebook. He said, this is what I've got. I said, Dave, this is life and death. We don't know what this man's going to do to us. But don't worry, whatever he does to us, there are guys that are going to take care of him. Maybe they will revenge for us. Okay? Then this guy came. He told us that, guys, since you kick out Willie Sira is plotting. Willie Sira, guys, is black. Don't be mistaken. He's a black guy. He's plotting to kill you. Next Monday, Dave, you'll be gone. This is a hitman now. Crispin is telling us. Dave, you'll be gone. Eric, you are next on Tuesday. I'm here to tell you that. Then Dave was just writing. I said, Dave, you see, are you not serious? Can't you see this guy is serious? Then this guy, he said, guys, could you please buy me some pills? Because I don't know what was happening in his head. Please. Then Dave asked one question. Who killed Vusimbeje? This guy says, it's me. I killed Vusi with the instruction from Willie Sira. We were shocked. Dave was shocked. Everybody was shocked. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to talk a lot. David Hemson, he loved dog workers. He loved dog workers more than his family, more than his children. I know this young man. He was young. I don't know whether he still recognizes me. He was very young. And this other, where's the other one? Oh, the other one. They were very young. But David didn't care about them. He only cared about us. Every time we sleep 11 o'clock, sometimes we sleep outside. David will eat bread. We'll eat, not meat. No, we never eat meat. We eat bread and cold drink and milk. That's it. We eat like that. We'll share. We'll miss you, comrade. I'll miss you, brother. Because to me, Dave, you'll always be my brother. And Dave, let me tell you, my brother, I know your spirit is hovering upon us. Your ashes is down there by the harbor. May your ashes light up the harbor so that the authorities can stop slavery in the harbor, can stop casualization in the harbor, can stop exploitation through you, Dave. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
It's been a wonderful and humbling experience listening to the stories of David. I unfortunately wasn't get a chance to meet him, but I have had the privilege and sadness of playing stop. We cannot stop, and we must not stop. And that seems to be the sentiment of a lot of these events, and it reflects the caliber of these individuals, I think. So this was one we chose because I think it reflects that quite well. Or maybe that's not so.
Where all the flowers gone, long time passing. Where all the flowers gone, long time ago. Where all the flowers gone, 'cause I think they're everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they where all the young girls are, long time passing. Where all the young girls are, long time ago. Where all the young girls are, they take the nonsense everyone knows. When will they ever learn? When will they where all the young men gone, long time passing. Where all the young men gone, long time ago. Where all the young men gone, long
We're just going to play a quick voice note from Suzanne, who's just sent us a message from the United States.
then you proved yourself to be very courageous. You dared to enter a tight and high... A farewell letter to my dearest David. When we first met, you reminded me of my sewing machine. It was an older model, a Singer, sturdy, reliable, no frills, and always ready to do the job that needed to be done. I really liked that. And then you proved yourself to be very courageous. You dared to enter a tight and highly protected little circle of 4 spirited little girls. Yes, they did give you a hard time, but you never gave up. And today, I'd like to say thank you, David, for your bravery and persistence. You've been my loving husband for the past 20 years, and you were always there when I needed you. You were reliable, caring, intelligent, and attentive, sometimes too much. But lest we forget, you were also often annoying, loud, inappropriate. For example, that gold hat, my goodness. And sometimes just plain naive about things. But through it all, you had my deep love and deep devotion. Today I say farewell to my big comrade angel, David. You now have wings, along with your spear and your shield. So I hope you organize those spirits up there in heaven. They've got to help us who are left down here on earth. You will be with us, and especially with me, forever and ever. Your Sue. Bye-bye.
Our next speaker is Dr. Betty Govindan, who's composed a poem, and she'll read that now. And after that, if there's anybody from the floor who wants to say anything, we'll have a roving mic for you. I know there are a few people who indicated that they'd like to say a few words. And while Betty's getting ready, we have a message from Omar Badshah, who's a friend of David's and many of you from the 60s. Omar writes, "My apologies for not being with you and other comrades. I have no access to internet in my area. Please convey my greetings to all at the gathering. Regards, Omar."
Good day, everyone, and special greetings to the family. I've prepared a poetic collage drawing from different sources to pay tribute to David Hemson. But as you know, nothing can quite capture the man whom we knew, who did contain multitudes. For David Hemson, where can we find a virtuous man? For his price is beyond measure. You are shown, O mortal man, in word and in deed, what is good, what is required of you, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your fellow men. You learn slowly that to those to whom much is given, more is expected. You look across the fences, barbed wire of separation. You see blood on the walls of houses and streets. You look across the fences and you see your neighbor, reapers in mealy fields, faces furrowed and wet with sweat, bags tied to their wasp waists, Women reapers bend mealy stalks, break cobs in rustling sheets, toss them in the bags, and move through row upon row of maize. The sun lashes the workers with a red-hot iron. They stop for a while to wipe a brine-bathed brow and drink from battered cans bubbling with malty mahui. You are born, entering this realm in the universe on Mandela's birthday, 18th July, 1945. You also become a Rollishlashla, pulling the branch of a tree to see that it grows evenly. You too become a troublemaker for humanity, and the world will never be the same again. While the comrades languish on the island prison, seagulls sighing over the waters, you hold the fort. Live life on the ground, fighting for workers to be masters of their fate. You know the fault is not in their stars, that they are underlings. Your constant prayer that the real workers are in control, that unions will be truly democratic, socialism will sprout from below. Your uncompromising fight for the dignity of Black workers, whose struggles, you know, shaped our history. To the far-flung corners, your dream, your call. Workers of the world, unite. Steaming ahead, you hear the coal train. Stimela, Stimela, Pinda Nzala, soul whispers in the deep, whispers in the night. They echo all throughout the land, song of migrant workers. The train whistle pierces the silence. Workers in overalls begin marching, singing, deep, deep, deep down in the belly of the earth. You are inspired. You cannot understand hate. In measured tones, you ponder over the comrades. I write what I like. Balance the scales of thought, antinomies of Black rage. This, incidentally, is a very measured review that David does of I Write What You Like, pitting the arguments of class and race. You scale down the ramparts of the ivory tower to where the people live. For your courage, audacity, you pay the price. Exiled at home, home in exile, enduring surveillance, arrest, imprisonment, you will not be silenced. You join the call for freedom's child, the rivers of our land, mountain tops, and the shore. It is yours. You will not be denied anymore. Cry, rage, freedom's child. That's from James Matthews. You embrace intuitively, conscientiously our collective history in the beloved country and beyond. Namibia is our neighbor, hewn from the same ancient tree. Soldier for peace, working class hero, you cross borders, calling for justice in Zimbabwe, Israel, Palestine, India, in Britain. You will not be silenced. Time to say goodbye. Do not go gentle into that night. Rage, rage against the dying light. You are the bridge across the fences. You remind us we are all tributaries of that great river of pain. We are all tributaries of that great river of pain flowing into one ocean. You remind us there is only one ocean, all our pain flowing into it. You remind us, but it did spill over the wonders of love into one nation of love, before we recognize that all the oceans are one. and a concluding line from Dennis Brutus, comrade and fellow traveler with David Hemson. When we think of you, your words, your gait, your stature, somehow tenderness survives. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Betty. We have Crispin Hemson will move a vote of thanks. And after that, some of you have asked for a chance to say a few words. Shall we do that? Maybe people come forward now. Yeah, so before Crispin passes his vote of thanks, if anybody wants to say anything, please introduce yourself for the guys.
I'm Nora Saneka, and a long association with the family. I want to say that on behalf of the Active Citizens Movement, we appreciate the kind of activism that David showed. And he was an inspiration in my own life. As a student, I belonged to the Wages Com at Howard College at University of Natal then. And I'm still an organizer, but I'm an organizer of ECD workers. And I am chair of the Point and Inner City Forum now with 58 different ECD sites here in the city where we are meeting here today. It was inspiration to me also in terms of my own involvement with the Young Christian Workers through the Catholic Bishops' Conference, where I became an organizer of the children's movement and a children's rights movement. So I'm like the second or third student generation after David had already left the university. My mother's cousin was associated with him. She would want to be here. She was in New SAS. That is Lynette Murray or Lynette Farragher. She sends her close best wishes. And I want to conclude by singing the song of Joe Hill. I dreamt I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you or me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, said he. I never died, said he. In Salt Lake, Joe, I said to him standing by my bed, they framed you on a murder charge, says Joe. But I ain't dead yet, says Joe, but I ain't dead yet. The copper bosses killed you, Joe. They shot you, Joe, says I. Takes more than guns to kill a man, says Joe. I never died, says Joe, I never died. And standing there as big as life and smiling with his eyes, says Joe, what they forgot to kill went on to organize, went on to organize. Joe Hill ain't dead, he says to me. Joe Hill ain't never died. When working men are out on strike, Joe Hill is at their side. Joe Hill is at their side. From San Diego up to Maine, in every mine and mill, where working men defend their rights, it's there you'll find Joe Hill. It's there you'll find Joe Hill. I dreamt I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you or me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, said he. I never died, said he.
Thanks, Nora. You don't mind me that I ask you to come to the front so everyone can see you and the cameras can pick you up.
I'm John Aitchison. Just a couple of anecdotes about David from the early days. I was in New SAS at university and then I got banned. and there was a commission of inquiry at the university about Horwood. Apparently, Horwood trashed his own office and blamed David. So this indicates what an irritant David was to the establishment, that a university vice-chancellor would trash his own office and blame David for having done it. The second example is, even in those, David was brave, and he was under investigation. I'd been banned for a second time, and David had arranged to come to Maritzburg to see me because he wanted some documents I had kept hidden about workers' committees, which was an odd piece of legislation which you could actually get into factories that way. And Selby Armstrong, an old ANC guy, had given me some documentation on that. Anyway, I was out, and when I came back, I went to my front door, and suddenly the SB arrived en masse. They said, "Where is Hemson? Where is he?" I said, "I haven't seen him." Somehow David had slipped out of their clutches, but it shows how even in, and that was the early 70s, the police were after him. And I just want to say, David was courageous, and he persisted. And that persistence, we all need to keep persisting in our irritation of the bad guys. A luta continua.
We have a surprise for you. Logan Moodley.
Good afternoon. So, good afternoon. My name is Yogan Moodley. I'm the deputy. It's much better. I'm the deputy convener for the ANC Veterans League in KZN. And my convener is Greta Appelgren, and the coordinator is Lee Lutuli. We watched a documentary recently with Sunny Singh organized. And in that during the documentary, I see 4 young girls there. There were 2 medical doctors and 2 educators. And they were engrossed in watching this documentary. And it intrigued me. They wasn't interfering with the mobile. There wasn't this, they were so engrossed with this thing. So when it came like this question time, and I asked them what brought them here. And then it says, the 2 educators says, we teach history, but we never knew who O.R. Tambo, what he stood for, what he has done. And that's our history. And he says, we are teaching at this age about Anglo-Boer War. But Ari will tell, when we almost the same standard, we were studying history about some dig from here, rode to Grahamstown and came back here. So this is the kind of things here. But I have to admit the democratic forces have shortchanged David. And we need to correct it. And how do we correct it? We need to document, write these things about David. And, you know, my last shot here is, before we lose David forever, let's remember him and let's do something. Have here, when we leave here, set up a committee here to write, his family is here, to write about David. And I think I see 1, 2 operatives of the special ops are here too. They too can come and assist. And where's Deborah Ewing? She's there. She wrote a few books. She also can come and assist here. And to David's younger son, where's he? I don't see him. Oh, he's sorry. I have an interesting story about the goat. But before that, I'll say, I don't have, when it comes to the customs of other people, I have to apologize for this, but I'm not yet to cause any controversy. Well, we had a farm, the ANC had a farm just outside Lusaka. And this fellow, Jabu, he came, he wanted a goat. And I said, there's a goat, here's a black goat. He says, no, you don't want a black goat. I said, why, Jabu? He said, I can't explain to you, but I don't want a black goat. He says, we are here because the Boers are discriminating us. Now your ancestors are here discriminating the goats. So that's a story I have to tell you. Thanks.
Thanks, Jürgen. I'm hoping that we see some recognition, albeit late, from the ruling party. Jürgen, I'll leave that up to you and Greta Appelgren, because we've lost a number of comrades recently, including Rogers Raghavan. Sunny Singh was accorded a state funeral, but I don't think David would have wanted it. But one thing David wanted was a last word with Joe Slovo. Joe Slovo was the guy who went to Tanzania, evicted him from the ANC. So maybe they're going to do it upstairs. Crispin?
Heritage Center, Tola Magubane, and his team for the audio-visual. Kugan Raghavan for the catering, Shelley Kionstadt, the photographer, Peter for his hard work on organizing so much of what's been done, including the printing, organizing the photographs into a coherent sequence and so on. To Adeni and Slovan Theva, just to mention that our cousin John Archer made a film with Leonard Cohen, whose Hallelujah you were playing, which is a really nice connection. And it was actually John Archer who took that great photograph that I had posted earlier. And then to those who spoke, all of you, thank you. I learned so much. I've always wondered where to locate the right hitman, but I'll come to Eric when I need to find out more. Betty, your fantastic poem. And it was your ability to draw together so many of these different strands that we hear about in David's life. Hari, for your marvelous work on being the person who not only introduced things, but also gave a bit of the context so that we can see. This is a very complex life in so many different places and so many different connections. Those of you who traveled far, I think of Trish, Trish Struthers, Margie. Margie and Halton were people who actually came at least twice to visit David and spend considerable time with him at a time when he was actually saying mainly not very much at all, but they gave so much of their time. Ben, for coming here, Jesse and Lee for making this long trip. And we don't have with us Jack, David's grandson, whom I met for the first time last night. But he's got a pretty demanding legacy he's going to have to deal with, I think. And all of you who came here, and I think of people like Professor Jairam Reddy, who is a survivor as the former Vice Chancellor of the University of Durban, Westphal. That was a very conflictual time that Jairam had to deal with. And Jairam and I have collaborated a lot in recent years. Ella Gandhi, David spoke so highly about what you had done in the years of working together. And all of you who've watched this online, thank you for your participation. I was aware of the names of people in my head, friends, relatives, collaborators, co-conspirators of David, fellow ejectees from the ANC, all of those people. I'm sure I have missed out some critical people. Oh, well, of course, in the people who've traveled, Soroya and Darian and Richard, and we had earlier Raquel as well, who was recently with us. So my apologies to those I've missed out, and thank you ever so much. We will now have a chance to eat and to interact with each other. Thank you. Run this out.